When King Wladislav II ascended to the throne of the realm of Saint Stephen, Bishop John Filipec of Varad told him that his new subjects would need to be forced into obedience with an iron rod. King Wladislav did not appear to have the will nor the means of forging one. As in Bohemia, he depended on the goodwill of the members of the royal council and the diet of the realm. He would use up a lot of that goodwill very early by having to get them to accept a peace agreement with Maximilian von Habsburg. The reason why this peace agreement was so unpopular was because Wladislav seemed to have given away a lot, especially agreeing to reinstate the Habsburg succession without ever suffering defeat on the field of honor. The fact that the realm was out of money and Wladislav was trying to avoid a multi-front war mattered little to a lot of the members of the Diet, which was summoned into session in February of 1492. As a representative body, the Diet was made up of around 1 to 200 magnates and great prelates, who had the special privilege of being invited personally by the king to attend him at the palace during the Diet. A lot of them were also already members of the royal council. There were then several hundred summoned representatives, sent from the diets of the kingdoms of Dalmatia, Croatia, and Slavonia, representatives of the clergy from the cathedral chapters and a few select monasteries, representatives of the nobility from the noble municipalities or communities or counties, and the representatives from the free royal cities. The number of representatives varied a lot depending on how many were requested to attend the diet, but it was usually 2, 3, or 4 per constituency. But the number of invited participants didn't really matter, as they were all outnumbered by the growing tide of hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, of minor nobles who insisted on their right to represent themselves before their king personally. The reasons for this tide of self-representation will be discussed later in the series, but it was partially the result of a king who was actually willing to listen to the will of the Diet. At the Diet, everyone split into different factions, usually the minor nobility gathering around influential magnates for a variety of different reasons. To get the Peace of Pressburg past the Diet, Wladislav was forced to negotiate with every faction and make many concessions. After reaffirming all of the promises he made in his coronation documents, Wladislav agreed to rid the realm of King Matthias's detrimental and oppressive innovations and novelties, and return it to the good old days of King Charles I Robert, Louis, Sigismund, and Albert. Many of King Matthias's legal and administrative reforms were revoked. The court's administration and tax collection were returned to the control of the nobility. Many taxes were revoked, and immunity from taxation of the nobility and clergy, as guaranteed in the Bull of 1222, was restored. Property seized by the crown during Matthias's reign was to be returned. Measures were implemented restricting the free movement of peasants between estates. Military obligations to the crown were reduced. The king needed consent from the royal council or the diet to go on military campaign. High office was only to be granted to the magnates of the realm, and the king was not allowed to consult or grant offices or estates to foreigners without approval of the royal council or the diet. To avoid any mid-century crisis shenanigans, a new law was implemented to safeguard the Holy Crown of Saint Stephen. The crown's guards were to be appointed by the royal council, not the king. Wladislav appeased the estates of Dalmatia, Croatia, and Slavonia and Transylvania by correcting the earlier controversial phrasing to now read Kingdom of Hungary and the kingdoms of Dalmatia, Croatia, and Slavonia, and Transylvania, and all the provinces subject to it. The Ban of Dalmatia, Croatia, and Slavonia was also issued with an official recognition of the equal status of the estates of Croatia and Hungary. One of the few novelties implemented by King Matthias that survived was the privilege of the Kingdom of Slavonia to only pay half taxes to the royal treasury. This privilege, that had existed for only a few decades, was reframed by the Slavonian estates as an ancient right. Wladislav also acquiesced to the demand that he spend the majority of the year in Hungary, severely limiting his influence on Bohemian affairs. Out of the rest of his 26-year reign over the two realms, Wladislav would only spend around 2 years in Bohemia. The Bohemian estates had to send delegations to Buda to meet with the king, and had to bear with the fact that the king's Hungarian councillors had influence on Bohemian affairs. Without a king in Bohemia, the lands of the Bohemian crown continued a decentralizing trend that started with the confessional divisions and was aggravated by Matthias's conquest. Visible signs of this decentralization was that the estates of the different lands did not meet with each other or take care of any joint business, and, in time, Bohemia and Moravia adopted Czech as their institutional language, while Silesia and Lusatia adopted German. But I digress. The biggest faction at the Diet of 1492 formed around Stephen Zápolya, who gained the support of the majority of the minor nobility by styling himself as their champion. Zápolya himself was a rich magnate whose family rose to prominence under King Matthias. Wladislav gained the support of Zápolya's large faction by appointing him as the new Palatine. After all these concessions, the Diet approved of the king's treaty with Maximilian von Habsburg. Soon after, King Wladislav also reached a peace agreement and then an alliance with his brother John Albert, who had been elected as King of Poland after the death of their father, King Casimir IV. Their other brother Alexander became Grand Duke of Lithuania. Unlike his predecessors, who paid lip service to the Diet and made promises they did not intend to keep, King Wladislav II showed no sign that he wanted to fight this new parliamentarianism. He almost always accepted the will of the Diet, and performed his duties conscientiously. He summoned the Diet into session frequently, and is said to have never missed a single meeting of the Royal Council. Now, the Royal Council officially had around 60 to 80 members, all of them magnates and prelates, but only about a dozen of the most prominent office holders met with the king frequently and handled the affairs of the realm on an almost daily basis. King Wladislav mostly acted as the council's chairman and supreme arbiter if any disputes arose between the councillors. The most prominent and influential of the councillors was the newly appointed chancellor, Thomas Bakač-Overdod, the Bishop of Győr, the one who advised Wladislav on his marriage. As chancellor, Bakač oversaw the administrative machinery of the state and held influence over other offices and positions. He was a highly educated Renaissance man. He was also highly corrupt and nepotistic, which will become a problem in the near future. Speaking of problems, as everything mentioned was going on, Ottoman raids were wreaking havoc along the border. Turnu Severin had been besieged but successfully defended. The defending captain sent 2 carts full of severed Turkish heads to Buda as proof of his victory. In contrast to the situation on the Croatian-Hungarian-Ottoman border, on the other side of Europe, King Ferdinand II of Aragon, king consort to Queen Isabella I of Castile, conquered Granada, pushing the last Muslim ruler out of the Iberian Peninsula, and then pushing out a lot of their new and old subjects. And over the far-flung ocean waves, land was sighted, and the world was changed.